If you're a fan of strategy games, you may be familiar with Fire Emblem, the once niche franchise that has since had a huge surge in popularity. Fire Emblem was the child of one Shozo Kaga, who designed the first 5 games of the series, but even after he left Nintendo, he never gave up on making Fire Emblem games. Instead, he would found his own company, Tirnanog, named after a location in Fire Emblem 4, and just keep making Fire Emblem for the PlayStation. Originally under the title Emblem Saga, Nintendo stepped in with a lawsuit to put a stop to a game that was Fire Emblem in all but name. Surprisingly though, Nintendo lost this lawsuit, and Kaga, after changing some names around to avoid legal issues, would develop Tyrian Saga, Chronicles of War Hero Utona. As a side note, it's said that this legal case is why it's considered okay for people to make super similar but legally distinct spiritual successor games. Published by Enterbrain and released in 2001 for the PlayStation, Tyrian Saga is a bit of a curiosity, as while the Fire Emblem franchise would eventually receive a proper 6th entry, this game acts as a weird what-if, showing what the franchise could look like if it went a different direction. While all the broad strokes are the same, it's the fine details that really make this game stand out. While the game has never been released outside of Japan, it is playable in English through a fan translation, which also changes a lot of the terminology to be a bit more familiar to fans of Fire Emblem. While I'll try to keep this video as general as possible for people who aren't familiar with Fire Emblem, whether you're a fan or not, let's take a look at Tyrian Saga. Tyrian Saga takes place on the continent of Liberia, where in ages past, the people were tormented by the evil god Gurxel. A hero by the name of Carluan was granted strength by the goddess Utona and defeated Gurxel. Carluan and Utona would be wed, and divided the land among their 4 daughters, bringing centuries of peace. That is until 50 years before the game proper, where the countries of Leda and Salia waged a war against each other, allowing the cult of Gurxel to rise up and gain power. King Bahanuk of Canaan would try to unite the lands against the cult, but the king of Reeve declined, after which Bahanuk changed, championing the cult's Zoa Empire. This brings us to the storyline proper, where you take the roles of Rudin and eventually Holmes, heirs to Roselia and Granada, as you seek to fight against the Empire and reclaim your land. If you thought that was a lot of nouns, you have no idea. Tyrian Saga kind of reads like one of those books that has a glossary at the back, and you'll be going through a lot of dialogue as you play. While I wouldn't say the story is hard to follow, it will throw around a lot of terms and names you may not remember the context for. This game is pretty ambitious with how it tries to create a fleshed out world and lore. The broad strokes of the plot are overall pretty typical though, with corrupt nobles, valorous knights, evil cult members, and dragons. Having said that, I think all the in-depth storytelling really helps you get invested in the world and characters. The characters here are actually really well done in this game. As you play, you'll gradually recruit many allies, and Tyrian Saga will continue to give them dialogue throughout the game. There are a lot of small cutscenes you can trigger that just have characters naturally talking to each other, or continuing their own personal storylines. It's nice to see instead of them being recruited and then ignored once their bid is done. Of course, you do have a main cast, primarily in the form of our 2 protagonists, Rudin and Holmes. Rudin can be described as standard for a Fire Emblem main character, idealistic and heroic, while Holmes is an adventuring rogue with an abrasive personality. They balance each other out nicely. Besides our leads, you also have a good supporting cast, and through them, you get to see the good and bad on all sides of the conflict. Tyrian Saga juggles a lot of tones, be it at times comedic, grand, and dark. Presentation-wise, this game looks really good. While the PS1 is mostly known for its early 3D graphics, the games that stuck to sprites were really able to pull off some good visuals. I like the backgrounds in this game. Whenever there's a dialogue cutscene or a fight animation, the locations look like they were painted and dropped into this game. This is also true with the levels themselves, with roads and tree lines looking like natural occurrences rather than a bunch of square tiles. This can sometimes make it hard to determine what terrain certain tiles are, but I found that a small price to pay for the visuals. I also really like the battle animations. As while fantastical in some ways, they also have a sense of realism. They're more practical instead of being flashy, which suits the rest of the game. I will give one warning though, some spells have strobe effects when you use them. You can turn certain animations off, but for those who are sensitive, some of the light spells contain a lot of flashing lights. Go figure. The character designs I think strike a good balance between fantasy and realism, not being too over the top, but not being boring either. Each one tends to have a unique hairstyle, color scheme, or something about their character portrait that helps keep them distinct. The guy who did the character designs here also did them for Fire Emblem 5, and the main characters of each game don't look like each other one bit. Sound-wise, Tyrian Saga has an overall good list of tracks. but that comes with an asterisk. Due to the type of game this is, you'll be hearing the same tracks on loop, constantly, and that can make anything seem tedious. But that's not the fault of the tracks themselves, and they hold up when listened to in isolation. Getting into the actual gameplay, Tyrian Saga is a strategy RPG, where you'll deploy various units to battle against enemy units and accomplish an objective, usually to kill the boss, or seize the location they're standing on. If you played a Fire Emblem game, or other strategy tactics games, a lot of this will feel similar to you, but it's in the fine details that Tyrian Saga distinguishes itself. Each unit you control is a unique character, with their own stats, class, and skills. Starting with stats, strength and defense will allow you to take and deal more damage. Magic determines your magical damage and defense. Skill affects accuracy, critical rate, and skill activation. Speed affects evasion and whether or not you can double attack an enemy. Luck slightly affects accuracy, evasion, and critical rates. And mastery affects what weapons you can use, with each weapon having a mastery requirement. Each unit has their own base stats and growth rates. When a unit levels up, there are percent chances of each stat improving. Leveling up can also grant skills, with each character having their own set that they can learn at certain levels. But there's one more aspect to character growth that's very important, especially in this game: promotion. Each character starts as a certain class which determines their capabilities. Swordsmen will have low defense but deal good damage. Archers can attack from a ranged position. Mounted units are very powerful and have high mobility, but lose their mounts indoors. Classes are important, and most of them could be promoted to an advanced class by using an item while above level 10. This does several things. The first of which is that it will boost the unit's stats by various amounts depending on the character, as well as possibly grant new skills or the ability to use other weapons. Promotions in this game aren't class-based, but character-based, so don't expect two units of the same class to have similar promotions. The second thing promoting does is increase your character's level cap. Unpromoted characters have a cap of 20, with pre-promotes having a cap of 30. When you promote, your cap becomes 20 plus your current level, up to a max of 40. There are also items which can raise the cap, but you don't need to worry about it too much, as a level 30 unit will do just fine in the endgame. The final way units can grow is through supports. Various units will be able to talk to each other, either in or out of battle. This will grant them a support, which will boost the accuracy and defense of a unit when their support is nearby. What's interesting about Tyrian Saga is that supports in this game are one way. While there are plenty of mutual supports, there are also a lot of non-mutual ones. But all this talk about units and stats probably doesn't mean anything without the context of the battle system. Tyrian Saga battles take place on a grid, with each tile being of a particular terrain. Certain terrains can provide evasion bonuses or hamper unit movement. When you select a unit, you'll be able to see their movement and attack range. That is, if you go into the options and set the display values to do so. I have no idea why this isn't the default. Once you're in range of an enemy, you can select a weapon to attack them and be brought to a battle forecast screen. Pay attention here or else you might misinterpret how to read this. To determine the damage you deal, you must subtract the defense value from the damage, unlike other games where the damage shown is the damage dealt. After that, you should look at attack speed, or AS. If your unit has 5 or more AS than their enemy, they will attack twice, or double. Besides that, you have your accuracy out of 100 and your critical rate. A critical hit in Tyrian Saga doubles the damage value and then subtracts the defense. After you suffer through all that math, your attack will go off, the enemy will counterattack, and you'll be granted some amount of experience points based on whether or not you killed them. There are 3 main weapon types in Tyrian Saga, with axes having more damage for less accuracy, swords having more accuracy for less damage, and lances being balanced between the two. If you're a Fire Emblem fan, you'll know about the weapon triangle of those games, which act as a rock, paper, scissors system between these weapons. That's not in Tyrian Saga. There's no weapon triangle here. Other than that, you have bows, which deal good damage from a ranged position, as well as deal extra damage to flying units, and magic tomes. Magic in this game can be deadly, as most units have little to no defense against it, as well as some tomes having really strong bonus effects. Finally, though not really a weapon type per se, there are staffs, which mainly provide healing and support effects. Aside from various hold or consumable items, that's about it in terms of how you play. You attack enemy units with your own to win. Sometimes there are other objectives, sometimes you can recruit enemy units by talking to them with others, but the gameplay is pretty consistently to fight your way through in grid combat. Just remember to strategize, since this game has permadeath. If one of your units runs out of health, they are permanently gone. Now the game does give you a lot of units to make up for it, but this isn't a game you can breeze through. In terms of overall difficulty, I wouldn't say it's super hard, as the game can give you a lot of powerful tools to work with, but that also only applies if you know how to get them. Tyrian Saga is a bit of a guide game, where you'll completely miss certain things if you don't know about them. These could be units, powerful items, support conversations, or special promotions. Now while I generally format my videos as a pitch to generate interest and get you to play the game without spoiling anything, given the nature of Tyrian Saga, I thought it would help somewhat if I made a list of tips for the first quarter of the game. If you want to go in completely blind, feel free to skip to this part of the video, but for those who want a little guidance, allow me to give you some vague recommendations. In Chapter 1, you'll get Sasha as a unit. While her initial princess class isn't good, and you can't get a special promotion item for her that she can use at any level, I recommend getting her to level 10 as a princess, as she will learn 2 useful skills if you do so. In Chapter 2, you'll have the option of picking 1 of 4 units to join your party. Pick Naren. Naren is considered by some to be the best unit in the entire game. He comes with double experience gain, decent enough base stats and growth. If you grab a promotion item for him as early as Chapter 3 and give it to him once he reaches level 10, you can make him just a little bit stronger. His portrait's not hunched over from meekness, his back hurts from carrying your army. Also in Chapter 2, visit Plum's house with Enta to recruit her, and then make sure Plum visits her grandpa's house for a useful item. In Chapter 3, visit this house with Runen to unlock stuff later down the line. In Chapter 4, send a cavalry unit to kill the bandits before they destroy the house in the northwest, so you can recruit Raquel. Raquel is a very strong archer who could easily kill everything by herself if it wasn't for the fact that she can't kill human enemies. This makes her very useful for setting up kills for weaker units. In the same chapter, you can recruit Vega by talking to him with Julia. For the last time in Chapter 4, you can avoid killing Roger and Mel by surrounding him with female units as he won't attack them, and Mel will only heal. In Chapter 5, there is one unit colored slightly different and is a bit stronger. Talk to him with Runen to recruit him. His name is Zeke, and he is very good. Finally, Tyrian Saga has several route splits, where you'll divide your armies between Runen and homes. Runen's chapters are typically harder and involve more open areas. Holmes' chapters, on the other hand, are a lot more indoors, and allow for extra chapter grinding so you can boost your weaker units. What's important though, is that each character has events that only happen on Runen or Holmes' route, sometimes with them being mutually exclusive. I recommend putting these characters in these armies for the first split. And with that said, these tips should provide you with some help if you want to play the game without being glued to a guide. Tyrian Saga is a great game, with good graphics, gameplay, and story. Kaga would eventually develop a follow-up game titled Tyrian Saga Series Berwick Saga Lasberia Chronicle Chapter 174. It takes place long after, and though technically a sequel, it's virtually standalone. Funny enough though, the Saga games are being succeeded to this day, as in 2016, Kaga would develop a spiritual successor yet again, in the form of Vesteria Saga 1, the start of a new series. While it wouldn't get as much of a following as Fire Emblem, Tyrian Saga should be remembered not as a clone, but as an example of what could have been. From what I can tell, a lot of Fire Emblem fans who play it consider it to be one of the best of the franchise. So if you're a Fire Emblem fan or just curious to try this cult classic, go play Tyrian Saga.